With just 2 weeks to go until Election Day in the United States, President Donald Trump and former Vice President Joe Biden are campaigning fiercely in the key battleground states where the highest number of electoral votes are up for grabs. States like Pennsylvania, Ohio and Michigan handed Trump the keys to the White House in the 2016 election. But so far, Joe Biden has led national polls across the Rust Belt states, and early voting turnout has hit a record high, with more than half of the voters being Democrats. So will these early indicators lead to a Biden victory, or will they be wrong again and give way to 4 more years of President Trump? To discuss this, I'm joined by Ron Nehring, former chairman of California's Republican Party and director of international training at the Leadership Institute, who also served as the national spokesman in the presidential campaign of Texas Republican Senator Ted Cruz. It's great to have you on the program today.
Thank you.
We also connect with Brendan O'Connor, Associate Professor of American Politics at the University of Sydney's US Study Centre. It's lovely to see you again.
My pleasure.
Well, now, my first question to you, Ron. Now, early voting has started in the US, and of course there is this very strong bipartisan divide on that. And while Democrats, they've been encouraging people to cast their ballots as early as possible, while the Republicans were more in favour of waiting until Election Day actually happened. And right now there's been a record early voting turnout, especially among Black Americans who are more likely to vote blue. Well, how worried do you think the Republican Party is right now?
Well, the result that we see right now with so many Democrats voting early is the result of the president basically pouring cold water on the idea of voting by mail, which is how many people are voting early. And I'm not sure that that was a particularly helpful strategy, but it is what it is. And so I think you're going to have many Democrats wind up casting their votes early. Republicans will cast their votes late. What matters is how those people vote at the end of the day, which candidates they vote for and support. So I'm not so much concerned about when people vote. I would be more concerned about which candidates they're ultimately going to vote for. Part of the challenge for the candidates now is that with each passing day, there were fewer votes that are available fewer voters are yet on the table to be persuaded. Once a vote is cast, it can't be changed, and so the number of votes that are available to be, for people to receive messages and make a change in their vote is declining every day, and so the window is closing for both candidates. Right now, that benefits Joe Biden more than it does the president.
And of course, Biden is leading national polls. And Ron, right now, the presidential race in the Rust Belt states seems extremely close. And Biden has, of course, mainly targeted President Trump's COVID-19 response. But do you think Americans have any greater faith in the Biden administration COVID-19 policy? And also, do you think Trump will be able to hold on to states like Pennsylvania and Ohio?
Yeah, so in America, there's a big cultural gap here in the country, and the Democratic Party is more strongly affiliated with the coastal urban centers of New York and Los Angeles and so on. And there are many people who don't live in those areas who really feel that they're not connected to the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party is speaking to a different set of issues and represents a different set of values than they do. And so that's part of the struggle that's taking place here. When that cultural gap is prominent, it puts Republicans in a better position in Ohio, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and the like. When that cultural gap has been moved aside by concern over COVID, the economy, and other issues, then it puts Democrats in a better position. So right now, it's not only a struggle over for the individual voter, but it's a struggle to define what is the news of the day. And if the news of the day is COVID, that helps Joe Biden. If the news of the day deals with the economy or how touch the Democrats are on a variety of other issues, then it's a good day for President Trump. So that's a challenge on the part of each campaign, not only to reach voters, but to set the tone of the day and what the news media will be talking about.
Now, Brendan, so the national polls, so far they've indicated that Biden is the front runner, even in most battlefield states. But of course, polls were wrong last time around in 2016. Who do you think will claim states like Ohio, Michigan and Pennsylvania?
Well, I'm always focusing on the state-by-state polls in these battleground states. As you say, the national polls sometimes make the headlines, but it's not a national election. Even those of us who live outside of the United States know about this thing called the Electoral College, that each state is worth a certain amount of votes proportionate to population. So the key states in American elections, really since the 1960s, have been Florida and Ohio. If you win those two states, you're pretty much guaranteed the presidency. But that's not the case this time round. There's some states like Arizona that look very strong for the Democrats. So Trump really needs to win not just Florida and Ohio, but also Pennsylvania and pick up Michigan to get over the line. And that is a big ask because the polls in those four states do go up and down. They're narrowing clearly in Florida, but Pennsylvania, where Joe Biden was born, Scranton, the polls are looking good for the Democrats. Polls generally pretty good for the Democrats in Michigan. So to win all four of those states, which Trump needs to win, I think, to win the presidency, is an enormous ask. And as Ron rightly says, many people have already voted or are voting at the moment, and that's not what the Trump campaign would want. In some ways, the Trump campaign wants the third debate this Thursday in American time to turn the tide, late voters to go to Trump, as quite a few of them did in 2016. But that story doesn't look like repeating itself. So there are a lot of Trump supporters that I hear from that believe the polls were wrong last time. They'll be wrong this time. But the pollsters have had to work on their credibility. I mean, if polling is going to survive as a profession, it really needs to have got its act together for this election. Because if it doesn't, a lot of us who comment on American politics have got to look elsewhere for our information, and it makes us look pretty foolish. So I think they will have improved. They did improve for the midterm elections. They weren't so bad for the Obama victories. They're fairly close to the margin. So sure, they've had some bad times. 2016, the Brexit vote also, but the pollsters hopefully have really been working on their models and better understanding this issue of particularly whites without a college degree and factoring them into the voting Trump's base as much as possible.
And it seems like, so Brendan, it does seem like the Democrats, while Joe Biden this week has been rather quiet, he has been ramping up his video campaign, and he has been targeting those voters that you were talking about. He's also been reaching out to the elderly and also, just even women in rural areas who, reminding them of the way life used to be. And do you think this kind of strategy is working in those areas?
Yes, I mean, Biden's whistle-stop tours is appearing next to tractors and sort of machinery, trying to suggest that he is the voice of working-class Americans, of union voters, those people that Trump did really get over in large numbers last time round. The female vote, many of us thought that would be a handbrake on Donald Trump's run to the presidency because of the Access Hollywood tapes. It wasn't. But this time around, there seems to be in all the polls the sense that women are not, in general, particularly taken by Trump's record, his presidency. So bad news for him there. Trump has mocked Biden as being, more ready for a retirement home than the White House with some ads of his own. And this, again, I don't know if is a particularly good strategy because Trump needs, as Ron was saying, those elderly voters who are traditionally Republican, particularly elderly whites, to come on board for Trump. And if they feel mocked, if they feel more reassured by Biden, that's a good news story for the Democrats. So all the signs got Trump in a very difficult place at the moment.
Well, Ron, the president, he continues to campaign and appear in public without a mask, but at the same time, he manages to wear the Make America Great Again cap. And well, as a Republican strategist, can you tell us why President Trump seems to think this is a good idea? And would you say this is necessarily a good strategy 2 weeks ahead of the election?
So, I worked for a different candidate 4 years ago, and my predictions about Donald Trump were wrong. So please keep that in mind as I dish out, this advice here. I think that the critical weakness here on the part of the president has been the response to COVID-19. And by being seen as someone who is resisting the sound science with respect to masks and social distancing, even after he contracted the illness himself, that does not send the right message to some of the voters who are out there who like his policies, who like his tax cuts, his deregulatory agenda, what you would broadly call his America First agenda, but are, but don't like some aspects of his approach to the job. And so there's nothing there to offer to those people to bring them back, other than threats that that certain people will be moving into your suburban neighborhoods if Joe Biden is elected or things like that. So the irony is that the president's enormous concern over the economy, which is justified in this pandemic, but his approach to that wound up leading to a situation which we have today, which is much worse than what we have in Europe. It's moving the peak of the virus closer to Election Day, as opposed to if some of the tougher measures were implemented more quickly earlier in the cycle, then the peak of the pandemic would have been further away from the election, and the COVID-19 issue would have been diminished, and the president would be able to run on other issues such as law and order and his record on the economy, where Americans are willing to trust him more than they are willing to trust Joe Biden. So really, this is the entire political dynamic in America today is being shaped by the response to COVID-19. And that's been the single biggest thing that the Biden campaign can seize upon, and they have done so.
Yeah, I mean, from the outside, these pictures look extraordinary. I mean, people in large numbers appearing without masks. Donald Trump has said most people were wearing masks from your very pictures. We saw this was often not the case. Attacking Anthony Fauci, which we may get onto, also extraordinary. So the sense of Trump has brought this issue continuously back to the front and center, because the images of large numbers of people in the middle of a pandemic, with the rate rising of infections and the death toll going up on a daily basis recently, this is one of the most extraordinary political tactics we've ever seen. And I think this time it may be a step too far in terms of Trump, sure, getting all the media attention, and that's been probably useful for Biden, but I don't think the attention will be turned to success in the way last time that attention somehow with Donald Trump did convert into votes.
Well, there are two different strategies that are at work here to get to a majority. The Trump campaign's strategy is to maximize intensity among those people who traditionally have identified with him, to bring out people who agree with him who may not have voted in 2016. That's the Trump campaign approach. It is completely different from the Biden campaign approach, which is not about intensity, because Joe Biden does not evoke the type of intensity on the left like Bernie Sanders did, et cetera. Their strategy on the Biden side is to win over those people who are either undecided or conflicted, which is probably a more accurate way to look at it. And so that's why their approach does not rely upon building large rallies and trying to pour gasoline on the intensity to drive that up further. You really are seeing two diametrically opposed campaign strategies in the broadest sense being implemented day by day and manifesting themselves in the events that we've just been talking about for today.
But Ron, well, most people do see Biden, a lot of people do see Biden as more of the boring candidate, though, with less of a personality than President Trump, and that's perhaps why American voters voted in favor of President Trump 4 years ago. Do you think this will be the case this time around? Do they want to see that? Do they want to see that personality, I suppose, in this election?
Well, it depends on who you ask, of course. However, I've noticed that in the 2000 election, for example, when George W. Bush was elected, Americans were looking for the anti-Bill Clinton, and that's what George W. Bush positioned himself to be. In 2008, patience with then President Bush had worn thin, and people were looking for the opposite of him, and they found that in Barack Obama. And then after the Obama era, people were looking for the opposite of Barack Obama, and there's no doubt that of the 16 Republicans who ran in 2016, Donald Trump was the most different from Barack Obama. So that's a historical trend on the one side. On the other, the president is more trusted on matters related to the economy. The economy is in tough shape right now. More people trust the president in terms of his economic proposals than the proposals you see coming from the left. If you take the candidates' names off of the proposals, the president's proposals do better. And it's just a question of, is the president going to be able to use his talents to focus the American people on the issues that benefit him, or will his tendency to go off the cuff and work off of his instincts and intuition lead to Americans thinking about a different set of issues that doesn't work as well for him? I think that's part of the tension that you see within the Trump campaign right now.
Well, the debate between President Trump and Vice President Joe Biden are coming up this week, of course. And in the last election, many people a lot of observers criticized that, it was just a bitter affair. There wasn't much of the presidential pledges going on, but more of the sniping between the two candidates. And well, Brendan, what do you think it was like for the rest of the world to really watch this first debate? I mean, seeing the prospective leaders of the free world actually resort to the sniping and name-calling. And what do you hope to see from the upcoming debate on Thursday?
Well, it was very unedifying. I was once called by some people in Australia who wanted to set up something like the Presidential Debates Commission and wanted to know how it was formed, because this was 10 years or so back, and they thought it was a great model. I didn't receive a phone call after the first presidential debate. I think most people were saying, well, thankfully we don't have anything like that. We certainly don't need to replicate it. So it was unedifying. It was really not befitting of the office of the presidency. And I think there'll be a lot of pressure on the moderator to really make sure early on that the rules are established and that both candidates get an opportunity to respond to the questions, and there may be some follow-up, but you can't have someone cutting in the middle of someone's first response. They haven't even got their answer to the question out, and there's just sniping, name-calling, talking about someone being a poor student. What would it have been, in Biden's case, sort of 57 years ago or something, when he was at college. So not particularly useful either on foreign policy matters. We just didn't get much substance because of this constant bickering and then Biden getting frustrated. So a lot of pressure on the moderator to get in control of that debate early. Chris Wallace, I think, lost control of the debate for the first half an hour. He did sort of pull it back with a more sort of strict approach as it went on. But it in some ways suggested maybe there should have been maybe 2 or 3 moderators to outnumber the debaters, and that might have been a better strategy than the one person I think can be talked over a little easier.
Yes, definitely more forces needed there. And well, Ron, most of your career has been about building up the integrity and the reputation of the Republican Party and really defending its core values. And well, as a Republican, what do you hope to see from the next debate?
Well, what's so astonishing is that the reliance on the tactics that we saw in that last debate that the president used, number one, it did not help him. And number two, there's no need to resort to tactics like that when you have so many great arguments and principles on your side. And so all the noise making and the interruption and all of that winds up being a distraction from the stronger arguments, which is that the ideas that are at the center of the Republican Party, a market economy, free enterprise, rule of law, a fair judicial system, respect for property rights, those ideas, wherever they are adopted around the world, lead to prosperity. So lead with that. The Democrats are proposing all types of radical ideas that would undo much of that and take away much of what makes the American economy the envy of the world, even in a difficult economic situation. And so I would love to see a debate that looks nothing like the last debate at all, that focuses on ideas and solutions. And the reason I want to see that is that I think that the Republican ideas would prevail, would be stronger. And history, I think, makes a strong argument for that. But by resorting to all of this noise and such, that becomes the story. That doesn't help, and you can see that in the results. Joe Biden's lead was consolidated after the last debate. Who defined the last debate? President Trump defined the last debate. So the opportunity for the president now is that, and the president is someone who, and I've studied his history, he does best when the stakes are very high and you're closing in on the end. And so he could change the entire dynamic of this race in a way that would be very difficult for Joe Biden to adapt to if he took a diametrically different approach, focused on ideas and solutions, instead of focusing on process and personality. That, I think, is the only route forward to change the dynamic and to change the trajectory of this race at this late time.
But one of the topics for the debate is already signaled to be COVID-19. Trump just cannot run away from that issue. And in some regards, he didn't get off with as much criticism in the first debate on that issue as was possible. Biden was a bit slow out of the blocks in that debate, looked kind of nervous, a lot of pressure on him. The moderator, I think, didn't really follow up on the COVID-19 issue. So with the rates of COVID increasing, with Trump having these mass rallies, even at the first debate, everyone in the audience was supposed to wear a mask. The Trump's children and their partners were maskless. So just this cavalier sense that the rules don't apply to them, things like that I think could get under Trump's skin in the debate. Having gone through COVID, I think he'll present himself as, someone who's unable to be touched by anything. But I think that it's impossible to escape that issue and move it on to the kinds of issues.
Hopefully we'll see more moderation in the upcoming debate this week from both sides, and hopefully they will keep the conversation moderate and rational rather than radical. Well, I'm afraid this is where we'll have to wrap up the discussion today. That was Ron Nehring, former chairman of California's Republican Party and director of international training at the Leadership Institute, and Brendan O'Connor, associate professor of American politics at the University of Sydney, joining us from San Diego and Sydney today. Thank you so much for your incredible insights.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And to our viewers, thank you for tuning in. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow with more global insights on issues making headlines. Have a great day or evening wherever you are. Goodbye.